Hello, dear friends. I am this past Shabbat, it's now Monday, this Parsha Toldot, which is that's in Genesis, Bereshit, chapter 25 and 26. And it starts off, of course, with the story of Jacob and Esav, but I want to continue again the parallels between hints in the weekly portion and the Hamas-Israel war, which has been going on over the last 5.5 weeks, 6 weeks. And again, I want to explain a few things, why this happens. As I said, when there's a major event which happens in the Jewish world, so the Torah, which we believe is divinely based and has its own narrative, all of a sudden takes upon itself a meta-narrative, which means it'll give hints here and there to things that are happening in this unusual event. And according to the Vilna Gaon, this happens all the time, but we just don't notice it. But when there's a major event in Jewish history, all of a sudden we start to notice these hints and they stare at us. Again, it doesn't change the narrative. I compare it sometimes to we know that the high priest in the temple wore this breastplate, and on the breastplate there were 12 stones. And under the stones were the names of the 12 tribes. According to our tradition, and it's mentioned actually in the Bible itself, in the book of Shoftim and the book of Samuel and Kings, that before going out to war, they would ask from the breastplate, like you have at the beginning of Shoftim, the book of Judges. They would ask questions to God, should we go out to this war, etc. And somehow they would get an answer through the breastplate. The Talmud says that what happened was that the stones would light up and the letters under the stones would light up. And since the letters are Hebrew letters, they would spell words so that they would get their answer to their query. And the Torah itself is something like that sometimes. And Rav Chaim Volozhin lived 200 years ago. So the famous student of the Vilna Gaon, he said, today there's no prophecy, and it's not easy for an individual to receive Ruach HaKodesh, which is divine spirit or divine inspiration. However, through the Torah, through Torah study, a person can connect themselves to God's will. And he even says that sometimes through Torah study, if a person is at a moment where they're studying Torah for its own sake, they can actually ask a question in their mind and possibly receive an answer. So that there is a foundation, there is a basis for this type of thinking. And sometimes the things that we have discovered in the parsha are quite astounding. It's as if the Torah is talking to us. And this week, there are only a few. As the war is developing, eventually what's going to happen, it's going to sink back and submerge under the sea of the Torah. But at this point, there are a lot of points where it's still pointing out to us. So last Monday, I got a call from a friend of mine, not a call, actually a WhatsApp. And they said, did you notice that in Parsha Toldot, it mentions Be'eri among the wives of Isaac? And Be'eri, of course, was the site of the massacre of one of the kibbutzim, which is right near the Gaza Strip, where 10% of the 1,000 members of the kibbutz were slaughtered in that kibbutz. I said, it's interesting, but I didn't understand the connection. Why 5.5 weeks after this would come up the name of Kibbutz Be'eri in the Parsha? And then on Wednesday night, Thursday morning, we got the answer. Because I said, let's wait. Maybe there's something this week. We'll understand what the connection is. And sure enough, it came up. On Thursday morning, it was mentioned that as the IDF were discovered that hostages had been in the Shifa hospital in Gaza, they were looking around and they found a body of one of the women who was massacred. And her name was Yehudit Weiss, and she was from Kibbutz Be'eri. And in this week's parasha, when it talks about the wives of Esav, in chapter 26, verse 35, says the first wife, her name was Yehudit, the daughter of Be'eri, meaning Yehudit from Be'eri. It's right there. It's like it's a bit shocking. It's a bit shocking. By the way, they found another body of a woman soldier, also who was murdered by Hamas. Her name was Noah Marziano. She's not mentioned here. And by the way, in Parshat Vayishlach, Rashi says that this Yehudit bat Be'eri had another name. I discussed that when I talk about the Parshat Shavua, but I'm not going to discuss it in this context. I just want to mention that other name is Oholivama bat Ana. And Ana, in Hebrew, is the letters of Noah. I just wanted to point that out. But the first one is much more striking. My opinion, there's a reason why the second one is hinted to, but I'm not going to say it. But the first one is much more striking, where you can actually see an uncanny thing. And I discovered after the fact that I'm not the only one who noticed it. Some other people too were noticing these things. Another thing, right before this, the marriage of Yitzchak, of Esav, to these women, these Canaanite women, you have here a story where Yitzchak goes down to Gerar. Now, Gerar is a small town in the south. Today, it's on the way to Beersheba. It's unclear to me biblically where it was at the time, but somewhere in the south of Israel. And there are a couple of things that happened in Gerar. They tried to take away his wife Sarah, but what I want to focus on is the story of the Be'erot, which is also interesting, Be'eri, Be'erot. But the fighting, Be'er in Hebrew, of course, means a well. So the fighting over the wells, which in Hebrew is Be'er. There's a fighting over the wells between Yitzchak and the men of Avimelech, the king of Gerar, his servants, whoever was working with him, because these wells originally were dug by Abraham, and they were closed off by the Plishtim, by the way. Plishtim, the reason why Palestinians call themselves Palestinians is because the Romans wanted to claim that this land was the Philistine land. Anyhow, so these were Beirut, which were filled up by the Plishtim, by the Philistines, after Abraham died, and Yitzchak wanted to redig the three wells. So he redug the first well, and he had a big fight between the Roim, the shepherds of Avimelech, and his shepherds. Why are you redigging this well? It's on our land. And they called the first well Asek, they called it the quarrel, because they had a quarrel over that first well. And then he dug up the second well, and they didn't like that either, and they called the second well Sitna, which means enmity. And then the third well, after he dug up, they decided not to argue anymore, and therefore it was called Rechovot, which means to broaden. And they said, for now, God will broaden our land, and we will be fruitful in it. This also seems to be an indication of what has been going on since the beginning of the war. The first part where Hamas and Israel were fighting, and it was basically it's called hitaskut. There's a major quarrel, but where is the quarrel happening? It's happening all over the world for some strange reason. Where we were sure that things were black and white, the whole world would be on our side, and the top leaders were, and all of a sudden the media is turning everything topsy-turvy. So it starts off with a quarrel. Then the second be'er, the second well, is called hatred, enmity. And all of a sudden there's this mass hatred around the world for Israel and for the Jews based on nothing. Where Israel is showing restraint, it's following all the rules of war. Hamas is following absolutely no rule of war. They only target citizens, and they slaughter and they beheaded, they rape, and that seems to be the whole world is topsy-turvy. And of course, the third one is called Rechovot, which means the Torah is giving us a little hint. It's time to broaden the land of Israel. You don't have to have hatred and killers in your land. People who want to live here respectfully, want to live with us, yes, they should be our brothers, our cousins, whatever you want to call it. They are our brothers. Those who hate us, those who don't respect law, those who teach hatred, they have no place in any society, really. People have to earn their place in society by obeying the laws. And so we see from the Parsha, it says, Yerchiv Hashem lanu farina ba'aretz, which is very interesting point, in my opinion. Now, one other thing I want to point out. Right after this, Avimelech, the king of Gerar, again from the south, he catches up. Of course, after this Isaac, God appears to Isaac and says, don't be afraid. I'm with you. I'm going to bless you. You will be multiplied. And this is the blessing I gave to Abraham. So God says to Isaac, don't worry. There might be a lot of hatred around there, but I'm with you. So don't worry. And one last thing. So Avimelech, the king of Gerar, and Fichol, his commander-in-chief of the army, they go to meet with Isaac. And Isaac says to them, why are you coming to meet me? You didn't like me. In fact, you hate me. And you told me to leave. First of all, when you tried to take my wife, and we left after that. And so I had to say that she was my sister, just so you wouldn't kill me. And secondly, with the Beirut, with the wells. So why all of a sudden are you coming to make a covenant with me? And Avimelech says to Isaac, to Yitzchak, Ra'o ra'ina, we saw that God is with you. And therefore we want a covenant with you. So they made a covenant. And the covenant was, we will not do evil one to another. And he sent him away in peace. So this is what I assume the Torah is telling us is going to happen. If we are steadfast in our conviction to get rid of Hamas in Gaza, and Hamas is a terror organization, it's not the people themselves. It's very unfortunate that the majority of the people seem to be supporting what's been going on. This has to change too. But if we are steadfast, the Torah is telling us, many people will want to make covenants with us. And I am hinting here at the Abraham Accords, because a lot of people are afraid of these terrorist organizations, and a lot of what people giving the double talk or the double rhetoric is because of their fear of these organizations backed by Iran. So if Israel is steadfast, and if our Western allies are steadfast with us, there will be major changes which will happen in the Middle East very soon after Hamas is gone. And I will end off by, again, a positive message aside from that. At the end of this week's Parsha, when Esav sees that his father and his mother were very bitter over these Canaanite women that he married, he goes and he takes a daughter of Ishmael for a wife. And it doesn't say that his parents were bitter. This is the proof of what the rabbis write in the Midrash and in the Talmud, that Ishmael did tshuva, that Ishmael changed his ways eventually. Because or else, why would they be happy that Esav took a daughter of Ishmael? And so obviously they saw Ishmael as somebody who had gone through a certain turnaround. That can happen, but it only happens after we are steadfast in our convictions of who the land belongs to, that there will not be terror here, there will not be violence anymore, there will not be hatred, and then our neighbors will come through, in my opinion, and in my belief, and things will be going better. And may there be peace over Israel and all of the world. Shalom, shalom.